It's Friday, the 21st of April, 2023. Welcome to another exciting edition of Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television, live on YouTube, as well as on Facebook. This is the show where we put Ghana first. On today's edition of the show, the former Minister of Environment, Science and Technology has revealed that top government officials are actively inhibiting the fight against galamsey. In a 36-page report, Professor Frimpong Boateng details elements within government who've been working actively to prevent the country from attaining the dream of a galamsey-free nation. On today's edition of the show, we get into the details of this report, get reactions for you, and also ask questions of the government. Stay with us here on the show. You're welcome back to Let's Talk Ghana. It's a Friday edition of the show where we put Ghana first in all of our conversations. It airs Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Studios 2 Television, on YouTube, as well as on Facebook. In our comment section, always leave a message there for us, and Tressa will do the reading for you. Today on the show, Ghana and a lot of you are not happy. Simply put, the fight against galamsey, which has been much touted by this Akufo-Addo government, is looking to be a sham. Why do I say this? A 36-page document written by the former Minister for Environment, Science and Technology, Professor Frimpong Boateng, has detailed how persons within government are actively working against the country's fight against galamsey. The former Minister for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Frimpong Boateng, has named top government officials which he claims were engaged in illegal mining activity widely referred to as galamsey in the country. In a 36-page report, as I've mentioned to you, addressed to the President, the Chief of Staff and the police, Professor Frimpong Boateng named some individuals he claims frustrated his efforts and the committee he chaired from addressing the canker. He also revealed that all ministers on the inter-ministerial committee abandoned the committee's work, except ministers for sanitation, local government, and rural development. The document, which also catalogues several instances of impunity by state officials, party members or activists, among others, cited the military for providing security services to illegal miners. Now, it's important to note that this report, which has been which is now circulating on social media, was commanded by the presidency. The presidency actually asks that he provides a report by the committee, which he chairs, to the presidency on the work done so far and the success rate as to the fight against galamsey. And on your screens now, I'm going to be walking through details of the portions of this report and what it says. So one of the very first things which I mentioned is that most members of the inter-ministerial committee abandoned the work. And these are the challenges he highlights, as you can see on the screen, the challenges which he highlights. And then the big one, mining in forest reserves. And so that for him was one of the teething challenges which he identifies. And it's quite lengthy, but I'll just read through, and says, without any prior information to chiefs and other traditional leaders, miners entered their communities and quickly produced an official small-scale mining license from Accra, indicating the land was approved for gold concession. And it says that to make matters worse, almost all the Ghanaian concessions owners sold part of their concessions to Chinese nationals who invaded the forest reserves. That's one. Then the third challenge he identifies is unwholesome behavior of some MPs and government appointees. And this is where it becomes interesting. He says that it is on record that the activities of some senior members of the NPP accounted for the anger at community levels. The Honorable Joseph Albert Kwam, the former MP for Manson Kwanta, exemplifies this, and he cites the example of how Mr. Kwam, as a result of his activities, lost the party's primaries in his constituency. Then there is a fourth challenge of mining by party officials and government appointees. He says that he can state without any equivocation that many party officials from national to the unit committee level had their friends, PAs, agents, financiers, and relatives engaged in illegal mining. He mentions Charles Nike Niteko, Lord Comey, and Frank Asiedu Bekwin, alias Protozwa, as some of these individuals cited. So these are names being mentioned by the former minister. He's not just making claims, but mentioning names directly who are benefiting or mining or taking part in this illicit act. Then the fifth challenge of established miners who are members or sympathizers of the NDC. So the opposition party is not left out. As damning as it is, the opposition party is not left out. The NDC is not left out. He goes on to say that in the Wasa East district, for instance, a former NDC deputy minister who is also MP for the Wasa East constituency has been actively mining in the Subri forest for years. Leadership, both NPP and NDC, undermining the country's efforts, are dealing with galamsey. Then the activities of Operation Vanguard. That's the next challenge he highlights, that when the soldiers were withdrawn from the Operation Vanguard on the 16th of March due to complaints by small-scale miners, mainly from the NPP stock, the police detachment took over the entire operation. This is when things deteriorated. So persons within the NPP stock complained, the police took over, and then everything went haywire. That's according to Professor Frimpong Boateng. Then community mining, which is a seventh challenge, he highlights. Then the eighth, the ban on importation of excavators. And this is where, amongst many other things, the examples of the senior minister was mentioned. Then ban on manufacture, transportation, and use of dredging equipment. So-called big men above, like Charles Owusu, Director of Operation of Forestry Commission, and the likes. And this is where he mentions the examples, like I mentioned earlier, of the senior minister Yawasa Fumafu. So these are copious evidence captured in the report by the former minister. We'll go on to the telephone lines now this morning, speak to Daryl Bosu. He is the Deputy Coordinator of Arocha, Ghana. Let's speak his thoughts on what we have seen and how worrying it is. Mr. Bosu, thank you very much for joining us. I mean, your general thoughts seeing the content of the report as captured by Professor Frimpong Boateng.
Yes, good evening, my brother, and thank you for having me. And I can say that I agree with you. The report is damning, and also to speak to the fact that this report was presented to the presidency in 2021.
Right.
And not too long ago, you remember also that Professor Frimpong Boateng also said almost a month ago that persons at the Jubilee House are involved in galamsey, necessitating the presidency to ask for an investigation.
Right.
And for us, I think what this report is telling us is that the presidency have had access to this report. Actually, they even had access to this report before the regional rounds on small-scale national dialogues were organized, and several recommendations were pushed forward by Ghanaian citizens and stakeholders talking about the need to nip it in the bud. And one of the key things that came up was the culpability of politically exposed persons, making it very difficult to nip the issue of galamsey in the bud. And this report actually unravels every concern we have been expressing to the fact that leadership is the weakest link in addressing the fight against galamsey. Because clearly, the various state institutions that are there to do their job they themselves do not believe in the fight, so they themselves compromise on their own actions. The presidency we saw also in respect of failure to act on several instances and issues of interference from politically exposed persons, where the presidency failed to act on those areas, shows that the leadership has failed all of us. And that's why I say that this has been a vicious cycle exposing Ghanaians to very expensive and risky endeavor, where we've seen a lot of our rivers destroyed, forests destroyed, and even social cohesion breakdown in most communities that used to be very, I would say, civil and very calm, with people going about their long-term development pathways. We've seen socioeconomic pathways now being turned to short-term extractive industries, with many communities, even the cocoa sector, being affected. And I think that just knowing that all along, leadership or the executive, per the report, have been taking Ghanaians for a ride is very disturbing. And I think that everybody who has been mentioned in this report, the presidency should first of all take steps to ask everybody to step aside.
Right.
If they are connected to government, they have something to do with the operations of the state, they should step aside and let the presidency show that they really have nothing to do with this. If it turns out that people were just not respecting his decision and his commitment, and so people were behaving another way, we need to see a true action from the presidency calling everybody to book. Otherwise, this is just not acceptable. And I'm really afraid that if the presidency is asking the CID to investigate the evidence that was announced by the probe, then with this, I even doubt whether we are really going to get to the root of the problem.
Which is something I'm coming to, Mr. Bosu, because, like you've been mentioning, I've read portions of the report where Professor Frimpong Boateng makes reference to instances where persons close to the senior minister, for instance, were caught in money laundering schemes, selling excavators and siphoning the money through the account of a reporter and the likes, and the matter going to the presidency, and the president never returning to him on the subject he put before him. And for the president to feign ignorance based on all of the things that we've been seeing in this report, to the comment recently by Professor Frimpong Boateng, it does appear that expecting something from the president will be a wish that would never come through.
Exactly, and that is why I'm saying that, knowing the fact that there's a clear evidence now that our executive is not really interested in addressing the woes of the citizens, I'm forced to say that then we don't know what we are going to do. We need an independent body. We can't trust any agency that is very committed, or that has the president appointing the chief executive of that agency to come and be the person to investigate this matter. Because it is really serious to see almost every agency that has something to do with actually protecting our water bodies, protecting our forest resources, even being culpable in ensuring that some of these illegalities continue to be perpetuated. And this is where I'm worried. Are we really going to get the truth out of this, even if an investigation is done? I am now also worried as to the state of our forest reserves. More than ever, it really puts a lot of pressure on civil society, on communities to really take action to protect their forest reserves, because the state itself, the agencies, and also the executives themselves seem to be on the course of destruction. And this, I'll say, is very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate, and you raise a concern of a worry for the country's vegetation. If you read the report just a bit more on the late Sir John, Professor Frimpong Boateng makes reference to logging of wood and rosewood, which he says that the current report he is dealing with cannot contain. In fact, describes the former Lands Commission boss as one of the many challenges, Forestry Commission rather, as one of the many challenges to the forestry cover of the country. In fact, for the president to be aware of some of these very damning things beyond the conversation of galamsey and his rhetoric on protecting vegetation and the likes, it does appear that we're in for a really torrid time for you, particularly in advocacy for the environment and the likes.
I'm really afraid because everything that we have seen being done to our forests, our water bodies, speaks contrary to whatever our president said when he was inducted into office in January 2017. We have seen the opposite of every good thing he said will be done happening to Ghana.
Right.
I am no longer surprised that the government is fighting citizens of the country just so that a forest reserve which supplies Ghanaians with 5 million Ghanaians with water can be saved. And here I'm talking about Tatiwa. So the kind of posture you see with the kind of, as exhibited in this report, with the negligence and the fact that they don't really care, shows why the government is bent on having access to every forest reserve in this country so that they can take their gold and just walk away and leave Ghanaians worrying about our water bodies, worrying about our health, worrying about our future. And this is where, like you said, I'm really worried for Ghana. I think we need to really sit down as a country and ask ourselves, how did we get here? And I can't but to put the blame at the foot of our leadership for failing us all in the fight to secure our environment. Now, if they come out to say anything about their commitment to secure our forests, say anything, I am really going to read that with, take that with a pinch of salt, because
but can
really
they though
convince us that they are not really just doing that for the optics.
But can they come back to assure Ghanaians of a promise to protect the forestry cover of the country with the reporter's menaces presented in 2021? Really, from all of the conversations on social media, it does appear that trust in the government, in the leadership, to actually deal with the illegal mining menace is one that has waned and waned completely. And not to even mention that Al Jazeera report, which one Alistair Matthias, amongst other things, alludes to siphoning over $40 million worth of gold out of the country every month and raising connections with persons in government and the likes. It does appear that now there's no trust at all that anything can be done to save the country's forest reserve.
Yes, I think we have for a long time complained about the absence of transparency on the part of the government concerning the state of our forest reserves. I think we were tickling ourselves when the Minister of Land came out to say that Ghana's forest reserves have their ecological integrity intact. That was for us a very deceptive and very untransparent way to actually communicate about the state of our forest when we know that all across the country there is not one forest reserve that is spared illegal activities leading to degradation and deforestation of these forest reserves. So like you said, it is really going to be very difficult, and this is where I want to ask the international community who are pumping millions and millions of money to our government agencies for the protection of our forest reserves to really demand accountability. It is not just enough to give money to this institution. Demand accountability, particularly the World Bank. They must demand accountability. All the money that they are giving out, what results are they getting for it? And so if we, the citizens, are struggling to get information from our executive, from our state agencies and public officers, we need to make sure those who are giving out money demand accountability. Otherwise, until we have an election and a new government, then this is just going to go on unaddressed, and I'm going to be worried about what are we leaving for our future generation. And this is where we all need to be concerned about. Our water bodies have still not recovered. Only to come out and realize that it's actually been a very vicious, deliberate attempt by the executive not to do anything about it. With people connected and who have access to government using their positions to continue exposing Ghanaians to destruction extractive elements of galamsey and exposing our future prospects as well. So for me, I think this is an issue that every Ghanaian needs to be concerned about. We can no longer sit aloof and say NGOs should deal with it and the political parties should deal with it. No, we all need to be concerned. We want the development partners, the international community to be concerned about what is happening in our country. When it comes to our forest reserve, it is not enough to just be giving out money. We need accountability.
Mr. Bosu, I appreciate that you could speak to us. We'll have to end the conversation here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us as well. Thank you.
That's Daryl Bosu. He is the Deputy Coordinator of Arusha, Ghana, speaking to us this morning, the Friday here on Let's Talk Ghana. And it's not just the only reaction that's been coming to this damning 36-page report by the former Minister for Environment, Science and Technology, Professor Frimpong Boateng. He mentions Kweku Baku Jr., the editor-in-chief of the Crusading Guide newspaper as well, and he has been responding to some of the details captured in that report, and excerpts of his response will be coming up on the screens for you shortly, where he, amongst many other things, says that he did not place those phone calls seeking to influence in any way Professor Frimpong Boateng into granting favors to the said mining company or the action that had been taken by the inter-ministerial committee on illegal mining and the anti-galamsey task force. But on the subject of the publications, which Professor Frimpong Boateng finds defamatory, he says that he's going to take steps to have the paper render an unqualified apology and the like, and that he wasn't directly in the production process or editorial process when those news publications came out. That's the latest from it. But looking at all of these and the details of the report, the commentary by the president. In fact, the president met DCEs and chiefs in the Ashanti region somewhere last year when he had a copy of this report before him and created a posture or created an impression that something was being done to fight illegal mining. Our rivers are still not clean, Mr. President. They're still not clean. You've had a report of this nature with mining happening in the residency or near the residency of the president in the eastern region of Chebi. All of these. Is it the case that the president has not seen this report? Is it the case that he has not cited it? It's been kept away from him? What was the basis of him writing to the police about a month ago asking that they investigate the claims of Professor Frimpong Boateng? Because all of these claims which were made in that interview with the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation are captured in this report. So how then does the president write to the police asking for investigation into allegations that have been made and have been on his table for almost a year? That's what Daryl Bosu says, that trust is out of the window from them, and that all the international partners must begin to demand accountability from our government. In fact, we received some millions just this year as part of our efforts in fighting climate change and the like, to help boost our climate change fight. We received millions this year. And yet, based on this report, government functionaries, government agencies, persons within government are proving inimical to the fight against galamsey. This is Let's Talk Ghana. Let us know what you think on this very worrying subject matter that has been captured in this report by Professor Frimpong Boateng. And I mean, Ghanaians will have to thank him for a great job, not mincing words and stating categorically the events as they happened. We'll return shortly here on Let's Talk Ghana with some more details, not on this, but Parliament resuming an emergency sitting at the instance of the Speaker of Parliament. We'll tell you what we know as to why the Speaker is asking MPs to return urgently. This is Let's Talk Ghana, where we put Ghana first in all of our matters. Right, welcome back to Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television. This is where we put Ghana first in all of our matters. Let's Talk Ghana airs Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays here. Like I mentioned, always leave a comment for us in the comment section and let's do the reading for you. We've been talking mostly on today's edition about the 36-page report, that damning report by the former Minister of Environment, Science and Technology, Professor Frimpong Boateng. We're going to take a pause on that because while all of that has had our tongues wagging and the likes, and obviously some angered and rightfully so, the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, has issued a statement, a letter really, to all members of Parliament, the 274 members, because there's one whose case is pending in court, to report on the 2nd of May for an emergency sitting. The statement, which will be displayed now on the screens for you, it reads just briefly that in exercise of the power conferred on the Speaker by Order 42.3 of the Standing Orders of the Parliament of Ghana, I, Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, Speaker of Parliament, do hereby direct that Parliament shall, notwithstanding to the contrary, be recalled from recess to sit on Tuesday, the 2nd day of May 2023 at 10 o'clock in the forenoon at Parliament House, Accra, to consider urgent parliamentary business stated in the office of the Speaker, the 20th day of April. So that statement came through yesterday. And urgent government business. What we're gathering really is that this has to do with some loans which the government is seeking to have come through. Remember, that was still before the International Monetary Fund because we're in need of some $3 billion extended credit facility. The finance minister has been speaking about 2 weeks ago when they were in Washington, where he mentioned that they are waiting that approval by the end of the 2nd quarter of this year, the board approval from the International Monetary Fund. What we're gleaning now is that these loans, which Parliament must sit urgently and approve for the government, forms part of the revenue generation measures and all of that to shore up the country's revenue gaps, to ensure that enough is done to assure the IMF that we can run an efficient economy. As to whether or not the minority will still remain opposed to it, because before the House rose, where these 3 revenue bills were passed, which has been assented to by the President, by the way, the minority had opposed to the revenue bills. They say they continue to remain opposed to it, and the majority didn't force it through because they didn't quite have the numbers. As one member of Parliament, beyond the Kumewu MP who's died, unfortunately, with the by-election slated for May 13, there was another MP who was incapacitated as a result of an accident. And so those loan agreements are what, per the understanding we get, is what Parliament is to consider on the 2nd day of May 2023. In other matters, though, organized labor, they have been meeting. They met yesterday. The spokesperson of organized labor, Dr. Yaoba, asked that labor groups stay away from this latest proposal from government, which the state says that they need to ensure cash flow challenges are not met. He says that they should stay away, but like we brought to you on Wednesday, Clocksack says they are satisfied with the agreement. As to what this means and whether the front of labor will be broken ahead of these negotiations with government, here on Let's Talk Ghana, we'll bring you details. That's our package this morning for you here on Let's Talk Ghana on Studios 2 Television. I am Eric Mawina Egbeta. Find me on Facebook as well as on Twitter, Eric Mawina Egbeta. Leave a message for us on all of the matters we bring to you. Until Monday, today's the last day of the fast. And so, Baraka de Sanla to all of our Muslim viewers. We'll meet again on Monday, which is expected to be a holiday, and bring you another exciting edition of the show. Many thanks for watching.
Studios 2 TV. The truth is here, in your eyes.